Welcome to the Break the Stigma podcast, where each episode we focus on raising awareness and debunking the negative stigma behind mental health.
Hey everyone, I'm Angel.
I'm Kianah.
And this is
Break the Stigma podcast!
This is not welcome to.
I know, I keep on thinking it's like, this is, or welcome
I
to.
say this is.
Oh, I keep on thinking it's welcome to.
On today's episode, we're going to be talking about PTSD and trauma and things like that. So it will be a heavier episode. Disclaimer, warning now before you guys watch.
Yes.
We are going to be talking about our experiences with trauma. Both of us are diagnosed
With
PTSD.
Yeah,
Both of us are diagnosed with PTSD, so we're going to be talking about some stigmas behind that and, breaking the stigma, because that's what this podcast is all about.
Yeah.
Do you want to start off with what PTSD is and how one gets diagnosed?
Well, there's two types of PTSD. There's post-traumatic stress disorder, and then there's like complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's basically going through like a traumatic event, whether it be sexual assault, just bullying, like anything that can be considered trauma that has a lasting effect on you.
Yeah. And a lot of people think that, when you think PTSD, a lot of people think like in the army and soldiers and PTSD from going to war and things like that. And although that is a form of PTSD, like you can, like Kianah said, have PTSD just from being bullied as a child or going through sexual assault or going through parents' divorce. Like anything that sticks with you for a long time is considered trauma.
Right.
And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand, and I think that's why people minimize PTSD so much, because they think that only people that go to war can have it.
Yeah, like I remember just like in different treatments, people that were like had PTSD and other people that weren't aware, they would almost like scoff or like scoff at like people that were diagnosed with it, because they were just confused and weren't aware that like other things besides like being in the military and like a cop or like anything can cause PTSD.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about what the different trauma responses are? I don't actually know the different trauma responses, so this is education for me.
Okay. Well, you know the two of like fight and flight,
obviously. Yeah.
And then there's freeze. Those are the three main trauma responses, and then fight. I'm gonna like go through fight and flight quickly, because those are more common. It's like when you're in a traumatic situation, you fight. Obviously, you try to get away, escape, and then flight is when you just automatically start running, leaving the situation. And you can leave the situation physically or in your brain, just those things. And then freeze is when everything stops. You're trying to do everything to placate whatever's going on. The moment is basically frozen in time.
Yeah.
So, do you have anything to add?
No, mostly because I didn't know that there was three. I didn't even know that freeze was part of it. I just knew, obviously, fight or flight. Everyone knows fight or flight, even if it's not related to trauma. It's
right.
Like a common thing. But I think I struggle more with the freeze aspect, because whenever I see something that triggers me, like I don't do anything. I just kind of like am stuck, and I just start dissociating.
Oh yeah, that's a big part of freeze.
Yeah, so I think that now that I know that.
Yeah. I remember I was in like one of the residentials, and I was in this group called Trauma Track, where you just talk like
Princeton House.
No, Renfrew.
Oh, Renfrew.
Yeah, they have Trauma Track.
I was gonna say at Princeton House I did the Trauma Track.
Oh yeah, I did that too, and literally it was the most triggering experience of my life, and I had to leave.
Exactly.
And I transferred to DBT, and then I just discharged myself, because like fuck them.
Princeton House.
Yeah. They just explained fight, flight, and freeze, and that's the first time I heard about it. Like I wouldn't have known about freeze if I wasn't taught.
So, like I said that the one thing that I resort to is freeze. What do you think is the one thing you resort to when you're triggered? Fight or freeze?
I think it's a mixture, and I feel like that's weird, but I tend to mostly freeze, dissociate, all those things, but sometimes I flight. I use flight.
Yeah.
Trying to get away from the trigger or the situation, trying to leave.
Like physically or like in your head? Like do you go somewhere else? Both.
Yeah. I brought up trauma responses. Can you bring up trauma bonding? Because I don't know as much about that.
Yeah, so trauma bonding is basically, I don't know the exact definition, but a lot of, especially when it comes to people that have physical abuse or sexual abuse, emotional abuse, anything like that, but like with a physical other person, a trauma bond is basically when you're bonded to that person by trauma. So a lot of the times when people are in abusive relationships and people on the outside are like, why can't you just leave this person? Like obviously that's the logical thing to do is leave the person, but what they don't understand is that that individual is experiencing most likely a trauma bond where they are like emotionally connected to their abuser, where they can't leave, they can't get out of the relationship because they're like, I don't know how to explain it, they're like attached to them in a way and they can't get out of the relationship, which is why a lot of people don't understand why people in abusive relationships can't just leave. Like it's more than that. They're physically bonded to that person through the trauma that other person is putting them through.
Right.
So.
Is there, I'm not sure, this is just like a question, I don't know if you know the answer, but people who, let's say like siblings in child abuse situations, do they have trauma bonds with them together because they've gone through the trauma by the one or two parents?
No, a trauma bond is like with like the
them.
person and the abuser. It's
Gotcha.
not with, like people that I used to, whenever I thought trauma bond, I used to think it was like, oh, we both went through trauma, we have a trauma bond. No, it's like
Okay.
it's like you and your abuser.
Okay.
It's like a more intimate like relationship connection type deal. Oh, I was gonna ask you, do you think you experienced any like traumatic event in your life that caused you to have a trauma bond with someone?
No, the two traumatic experiences that I've had in my life, I don't think so. Like the first time I was assaulted, I kind of didn't want to get the other person in trouble, but also I just didn't want to get in trouble myself. So I don't know if
That's a trauma bond. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you're connected to that person, so you don't want to hurt them.
Okay, then yes.
Yeah, like you were scared to get them in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So you were scared to tell to get them in trouble. Yeah, that's a trauma bond because you're like so you're so emotionally invested in that other person that you don't want anything to happen to them.
Yeah, like I didn't think they were a bad person. I just thought that they did a bad thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Congratulations.
I'm learning so much while breaking stigmas.
Yeah.
How about you? Same question.
Yeah, I definitely, with my ex-boyfriend Chris, I talked about him on one of our other episodes. He was very emotionally abusive, and I definitely had a trauma bond with him. I was with him for on and off for 4 years, and a lot of people, like a lot of my close friends and family, were like, "Why the fuck are you still in this relationship? Like he is so toxic and he's so bad for you." But I just could not leave him because I had this bond that I couldn't break with him. And even in my current relationship now with Levi, like I talk about it with him and he like doesn't really understand the whole concept of a trauma bond. He just like, I don't know, and I don't know how to explain it to him, but like I literally like I can't not think about him a lot because I'm still so emotionally bonded to him. And that's what I'm working on in therapy, is getting like away from that and like learning how to be independent in my own self and know my own worth and that kind of thing without needing another person to validate that. But yeah, so that was my trauma bond.
I got you.
Do you want to talk about because you were
assaulted? Yep. I won't go into like the first time because that is a lot to unpack, but actually both times are, but anyway, the last year around October I went through a situation where at first I was consenting to everything, and then in the middle I wasn't, and I tried to leave but I was not able to, and then was forced to continue having sex with this person, and it was horrible. I for the longest time, up until recently, I blamed myself, and I was like, I wasn't like raped or anything because I consented at first, and like I don't know, like it wasn't like it didn't in my brain seem like a him problem. It seemed like a me problem. Like I was bad and I was wrong. Until therapy.
Until therapy.
Yeah, I talked about it with my therapist, and that's when like my eyes started to like widen more about like, what really happened and why my interpretation of myself was essentially wrong, I guess. Not wrong, but like skewed on yeah.
I actually had the exact same experience. I think I might have talked about it in maybe one of the other episodes. But a lot of people think that consent is just a one-time thing, and it's not. Like, you can consent at first, and then in the middle, while you're doing it, like literally in the act, you can be like, nope, never mind, I don't want this, and that's no go. Like, it should stop.
Right.
But I had the same experience where in my, I think, sophomore year of high school, I was at a sleepover with my friend, and she told me that no guys were going to be involved at all whatsoever, and then guys showed up, and this one guy, you know, I consented at first, and then it got too far, and I was like, no, don't want to do this anymore, stop. He didn't stop. Basically, like a few days later, I went to my guidance counselor about it, and the guidance counselor, the person that's supposed to give you guidance, told me that since I consented at first, it wasn't considered rape.
Oh, God.
So, yeah, I had the exact same experience, and it definitely fucked up my interpretation of what I actually went through, because I thought that I was lying, because he told me that it wasn't considered rape.
Oh, was it he too?
Yeah, exactly. So it was worse.
Fuck him.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole idea of consent wasn't really like I had like a black and white interpretation of what that was.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And what happened to me seemed like, you know, consent good at first.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter like what happens afterwards. I said yes, and who am I to like
change your mind?
Exactly. And it took a while, and it's still kind of like a struggle for me to like come to terms with like I have control of what I want to do, and if I don't want to do something and someone else wants to do it, then it's not my fault.
Yeah. I'm also a really submissive person, so
me too.
Like, if someone wants to do something and I don't, I'm just like, okay, whatever, like, you're in control, I'm not.
It's so me too, and that's another thing I need to work on in therapy. But
yeah, I'm currently working on it, and it's weird because like I am normally someone that likes to be in control 24/7, but when it comes to intimacy, I get so scared.
Me
and
too.
So I like back down, and I'm like, nope, you can just control everything that's happening right now. Because
do you have any like idea of where that comes from?
Probably from my sexual trauma, because I wasn't in control, so I'm just like used to, okay, you're in control, I'm not going to say anything, I'm not going to do anything to try and control the situation, because it might lead to worse things than what this is right now.
Yeah, I agree, because the thing that happened to me when I was 14, that was my first experience with anything sexual in my life.
Yeah.
So, and then later when I like really lost my virginity and started having sex, I was like, I don't really have control. Like, I do have control, but like, you know, it's up to whoever I'm with.
Yeah, when you lose your virginity without actually wanting to lose it, down the line when you actually want to enjoy having sex, it's hard to enjoy it, because you're just thinking back to when you were at a time when you weren't in control and you were just being forced to do something you didn't want to.
Exactly.
Okay, so with that being said, guys, we're going to take a short break, and after the break we're going to come back and talk about some coping mechanisms that have worked for us and what we personally use when we're having some triggers, as well as things that you know, you can do that might help you. You know, we're gonna help each other out and lighten up the mood a little bit.
Yes.
So yeah, stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back.
During the break, we talked about what the plan is, different coping skills that we used, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Angel, kick it off with some of like general, or do you want me to kick it off, or do you have some? And
Yeah,
then...
I'll kick it off.
Okay, she's kicking it.
Kicking it.
Remember that TV show?
Kicking it, yeah.
Loved it.
So the most common skills set to use with trauma responses is the distress tolerance skills. We talked about this a little bit in our DBT episode.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be tip, stop, self-soothe. What else was there?
Why is my brain buffering?
Is tips
Radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance.
And then with radical acceptance is like turning the mind.
Yeah.
Which
So
is
those are like the most common coping skills to use. Radical acceptance is kind of hard because, especially when it comes to trauma, because it's basically like saying like accept what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, it's also like therapeutic in a way because you do have to accept that you can't change what happened. You just have to like cope with it. So it's like radical acceptance is hard in a way, which is why I don't really like it. Although that's literally what you do in therapy is you go through radical acceptance.
Yeah.
But my personal favorite to use would be TIP, and I've talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
TIP is temperature, intense exercise, and paced breathing and paired muscle relaxation, which really, really helps, especially if I'm like mid-panic attack. If I just need to like have something really quick to calm myself down, I'll splash cold water on my face. I'll do a muscle relaxation, which is basically when you like tense up a muscle and then let it go.
Mm-hmm.
My therapist actually does it with me in therapy where like we'll tense everything up and then like let everything go, and she'll guide me through it, and it really helps a lot when I'm like struggling with like a lot of inner tension and distress. So yeah, that's like my personal favorite. What is yours to use when you're in like a heightened arousal state?
So window of tolerance, there is a spot that you are mentally where you can accept, deal with, handle the everyday things of life. So there's hyper arousal, which is outside your window, where everything is just a lot like to deal with. You are frazzled, frantic, anxious, triggered maybe in a flashback. Like those types of things would make you be in hyper arousal state. And then there is hypoarousal, where you're kind of, it's almost like a numb feeling,
Yeah.
and that is like under your window of tolerance. So the thing is, the best thing to do is try to reduce the outside things to narrow or widen your window of tolerance so you can cope with more things. So, brief synopsis of window of tolerance.
So going off of that, where do you think you are in your window of tolerance in therapy right now? Do you think she's like pushing your boundaries a little bit right now, pushing your limits right now, or are you like good?
It depends. Sometimes I am hyper, or all three actually.
Yeah.
I remember last week my session with my therapist at PHP, I was definitely in like a hypo type of state, depression, numbing, all the stuff. So it just depends on where I am, what's going on that day.
So what's your favorite skill to use when you're in a hyper, right? It's hyper?
Yeah.
When you're outside?
Yeah, the higher one.
Yeah. So when you're outside your window of tolerance, what is your favorite coping skill to use?
It's not DBT. Well, kind of distractions. Like a lot recently, I've been doing more creative things like painting or like journaling. Or sometimes I even I have a voice diary on my phone where I just talk to myself I'm talking to a person and like just venting and getting all this shit out.
That's a good idea.
It really I don't know, I saw it on some TV show or something. I don't know. It's like, this sounds good. Let me try it.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it for a few months and it's definitely been good. But then there's other coping skills that I don't do, but I would like to try to do more, because I do it sometimes, like deep breathing, and I also it has worked in the past. I just haven't done it as much recently. Is like one of the P's, paired muscle relaxation.
Yeah, it helps a lot. I do it.
Yeah.
That's like one of my favorite things to do. And you can find on YouTube, if you look up paired muscle relaxation, like guided muscle relaxation, I mean, there's like 5 minutes. If you have like 5 minutes out of your day to just do it, it really does help.
Yeah, I love the YouTube meditations where you're putting yourself in like a beautiful scene situation.
Yeah, like a forest and like
or like looking up at the sky.
Yeah,
and just
exactly.
Something that will take you out of where you are in that moment and place you in some place that seems way happier than whatever the fuck's going on.
In the therapist episode, I'm not sure if you listened to it yet, but they were actually saying that they do it themselves between sessions. They look up like one of those meditations where you're like in a beautiful scene, and that's how they use that to calm themselves down, like between clients, and like get themselves prepared to like help the next client.
That's awesome.
So yeah, we're doing what therapists do.
Look at us, a future social worker and future therapist over here.
Period.
MSU, what?
Red Hawks fly.
Is that what they do?
Yeah, Red Hawks fly.
That is stupid.
Red Hawks fly. So we wanted to talk about like what happens like in therapy. Obviously, there's like, I don't know if you knew this, but there's like a curriculum for trauma work. I actually learned that from the therapist episode. I learned a lot from that episode. You should watch it.
I definitely need to watch it.
Yeah, so there's actually a curriculum for trauma work, and one of the things in the curriculum is like the trauma timeline and your trauma story, basically, I guess. And I'm actually doing that with my therapist, where we go age by age, and like I write down like what traumatic event happened at which age. Which I had something for every single age, which is fucked up.
That is sad.
Yeah, it's very sad. But you go age by age, and then like each therapy session, or like every other, whatever we decide to do, she'll say like a different age, and we'll go through it, and she'll say like, okay, what happened at this age, explain it in like great detail. And
yeah, I need to see Danielle.
You do. And so like the hardest part of that for me is that I like feel like I'm in that event again, and like I feel like I'm trapped and I can't get out of it, and so that's really hard for me, especially when it came to like the sexual assault part, like talking about that in so much detail. It was just like a lot for me to handle, and there's been like parts of me where like I just dissociate the entire session, and like there's been times when like 20 minutes out of the 45 minutes of the session was just silence because I was dissociating hellas. Like I did not know what to do, and that's like part of the freezing, I guess. Fight, flight, freeze. I freeze a lot when I don't know what to do, and so yeah, that's definitely the hardest part for me, is like going through and like feeling like I'm back in that moment that I like tried so hard to get out of in the first place, you know?
Right.
What is it for you?
I think the hardest part is also like feeling stuck in the situation, and I haven't gone too deep into everything because that shit just scares me. But I think another like hard part is that it does scare me and I don't complete it, so now I'm just stuck.
Yeah.
And it takes days, like sometimes a week, to like get myself to the present almost. Yeah. Which sounds crazy, but it does. Yeah, it takes a while for me to fully be Kianah again.
Are you processing trauma in therapy right now, or are you more so just focused on your eating disorder?
Most of like everything like I've been talking about is my eating disorder and my depression. I just can't, like when I started working on it, it was just too much, and everything else was getting worse.
Yeah.
So I think I need to be more stable before I start to delve deeper into everything that happened.
Yeah, that's definitely really important. Like I remember like the beginning part of when I started therapy with Danielle specifically, we focused a lot more on the food, and then we went into trauma, because you're right, you have to have like you have to have one thing under control before you dive into something that might put you out of control again. Like I got my eating under control, and then we went into trauma, and now my eating's kind of back to like not doing so well. Like I'm, not eating 3 meals a day, or not. But like you definitely have to have like your eating disorder, your self-harm, suicidal ideation, all that under control before you delve into something that could trigger the shit out of all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
what do you think has been, even though it's such a hard thing to like process and go through, what has been like a good thing to have?
I think definitely like going to therapy twice a week for me is really helpful, because if I had it, like, I remember whenever I first started therapy, I went every other week.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if I was doing that now, I would like literally go insane. Like, because if I had to process all that trauma and then not have therapy again for 2 weeks, like that, I would not be able to do that. So the fact that I could like process trauma on Tuesday and then know that like I have her as a support again on Friday, and like that I don't have to go a whole week or a whole 2 weeks without having someone to vent to about it, that makes me feel a lot better. Having that like constant support, and I can always email her. I have her phone number. I can text her. I have the journal that like the Google Doc that we share together that I can like vent in if I need to, and she like reads it. So that definitely helps me, like knowing that I have the constant support around me.
That's awesome. I could not imagine you doing that, going through everything.
Yeah.
Once every other week.
Yeah, and at one point my mom was like, you know what? I think you only need therapy once a month. And that was my exact response. I was like 15 at the time, and she didn't know any better. But like I could not imagine right now having therapy once a month at all.
No.
There's too much shit going on.
God, no.
All of it would like build up so much, and then the one-to-one session would come in like 45 minutes once a month. I would need like 4 hours.
Yeah. Honestly.
To dump all this shit out.
I would like, can we just do this like all day?
Exactly.
Like, that's what I would be like.
Yeah, that would be like my day plan. It's just therapy.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my god.
So what about for you? What is like the relieving part, I guess?
I wish I would phrase my question like that. There's a couple things, like I have my therapist program, and then my therapist, like my regular outpatient therapist, so I see them. It was like 3 times, because I'd see Kianah twice and then Jill once, but now it's like twice, because I'm an IOP. And then another thing is just having, like, I think something to do, like, being a part of, like, this podcast and, like, having you as a friend, and then, like, and having my siblings and my mom to be there for me, I think, is perfect. A perfect way to not feel as alone and as in my head about everything. Yeah,
that's definitely, like, definitely needing support around you. Like, I have my therapist, I have my family, I have you, like, I have a huge support system around me, which I'm so grateful for, because a lot of people aren't as lucky to have that big of a support system. But I'm really grateful for you and for, my family. Well, you are my family, you're like my sister.
Well, that concludes today's episode.
So with that being said, we're gonna cut it. That wasn't loud. Cut it off there. And there's a sex scene on the TV.
Wait, let's get it on.
Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode, and we hope to see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.